Before I get into what I had prepared for a presentation, I do feel like I need to take a couple minutes to respond to what you heard this morning on the building discussion. I did meet with Eric a couple of weeks ago for about an hour to talk about how we use the building and what our issues are and where we have excess space in that building and how we're sort of consolidating that. We did not get into the discussion of how we operate as a health department, though, at the extent that he might have needed to be able to make some of the recommendations he brought forward today. So I will share my concern in regards to one of the proposals of moving our environmental health division to an off-site location would be a huge step backwards for the health department. We are very cohesive as a health department, even though in Berry County, the building is laid out in a way that splits the department into two sort of areas. We actually do work across the entire agency, and so that would be very difficult for us to have staff spread through two locations so locally, and will make for a lot of inefficiencies in how we do work. So, and that's day-to-day work, just as simple as things like cash receipting and doing the mail and, sort of those kinds of things that we would then have to, come up with new ways of doing that to address the locations. But then also within our regular other types of work, some of which you'll hear me talk about today, things that we're addressing in the community, like our disease outbreaks and those sorts of issues, where it takes both the expertise of our environmental health staff and our personal health staff or our clinic staff to work together in order to resolve the issue that's going on. So, and then at the same time, losing that conference room space would also be a huge loss for us. To have staff have to then travel to a third site to have meetings and trainings and webinars and those kinds of things would be another significant loss of efficiency for the health department, because we're doing those kinds of things all of the time in that meeting space. And so, I appreciate creativity, and we're happy to continue conversations about how we could make this work. But those are sort of alarming things in my mind. That I heard this morning that I want to bring your attention to. So I hope the conversation's not over on that, and that you will continue to include us so that we can figure out how we would have to deal with that if that's the decision that is made. I will share that I do know that there are some health departments across the state that do have their environmental health offices split out from the rest of the agency, and in almost every single situation of that, they're looking for opportunities to bring them back together. And so it's sort of like what Dave said in terms of what you're doing with front of the court to move it over with the rest of the courts to create those efficiencies. You're doing that at the sake of breaking us up, which would, like I said, just be a big step backwards. So thank you for hearing me out on that. So I will move into what I had planned to report on today, which was to present our fiscal year 18 annual report, which you should have in your packet. And it's available on our website for those who would like to find it on our website. It is in the About Us section on our website. So if you look for that, or if you just put in the search box right on our main page, annual report, it will come up from there. We took a little bit different approach with our annual report this year, trying to make it a little bit more personable so that you can get a better sense of the scope of things that we do at the health department. So I'm just going to point out some highlights from the report, walk you through that. First thing I wanted to mention is, although it didn't technically happen in fiscal year 18, because of the timing of the report, we wanted to acknowledge that in January of 2019, the District Health Department celebrated its 50th anniversary as a District Board of Health. And so that was acknowledged at the start of the report, since we would be releasing the report after that time period. One of the main activities that we really focused on in fiscal year in fiscal year 18 was the hepatitis A outbreak that was going on throughout the state of Michigan in various parts. And part of our district was pulled into that outbreak in January of 18. We became an official outbreak county, and when we exceeded 2 cases of hepatitis A that were linked to that larger outbreak that was going on throughout the rest of the state. In the end, Eaton County ended up with 5 cases tied to that outbreak. Berry County did not have any. However, we did, over the course of fiscal year 18 and continuing even today, we did a lot of education and outreach and vaccination clinics in both counties to the targeted population to try to mitigate the spread of that outbreak. And so in June of 18 is when Eaton County was removed from one of the outbreak county list because we had gone a period of time without any new cases and were able to be pulled out of that. The hepatitis A situation in Michigan has been improving while it is getting worse in states to our south. And so, so that same strain of hepatitis A is still circulating in the area. And so it's still important that we're vigilant in trying to get the word out about hepatitis A and getting people vaccinated so that the outbreak doesn't reemerge. Summer is the time that you would more likely see it expanding, and so that's what we're trying to prevent. So we continue to do a lot of education and outreach and promoting vaccination clinics in both counties to encourage people to get covered. And the hepatitis A outbreak is one of those examples where the 2 halves of our health department, really 3 halves when you look in Eaton County with, or the 3/3 came together with Eaton Behavioral Health over there as well. But you know, hepatitis A was a situation where our staff worked together across the entire agency to bring that outreach and education into the community. So we had our clinic staff who were providing the vaccinations and doing that direct clinical service. We had some of our other personal health staff who were doing the disease investigation. So when a case came around, we had nurses and other staff who were doing those case contacts and making sure that the people potentially exposed to the individual that had the disease were being appropriately treated. And then the environmental health staff also played a role because one of the concerns for spread of hepatitis A is in our food systems. And so our environmental health staff played a key role in educating our food service establishments and our other licensed facilities to make sure that those areas were properly educated on the risks of hepatitis A and how to assure that, how to do proper screening of staff to make sure that they're not ill with it, and then what precautions to take to reduce the spread of that. So that was one of those sort of cross-cutting situations we had going on in the district where we regularly met as a full staffing team with representatives from all divisions to talk about how do we address this issue in the district. The next couple of pages in the annual report highlight our personal and community health services. We focused in on 2 different programs, the Vision and Hearing Screening Program, where we're providing screening services out mostly in our schools, preschools, Head Starts, those sorts of locations. And then the other program we highlighted was our Children's Special Health Care Services, which is a nurse case management program where we work with families who have children with chronic or other health issues and need assistance with paying for medical care. And so you can read about those programs in there. And then on page 9, we also provided a table that summarizes our program statistics for the fiscal year as well. The next couple of pages focuses on our Eaton Behavioral Health Division. This is our substance abuse treatment program that we offer in Eaton County. As you're aware, in Eaton County, we are the public substance abuse treatment provider, whereas over here, that service is provided through community mental health. And so there's information about those services on those 2 pages. The next 2 pages, 12 and 13, focus on our planning, promotion, and evaluation unit. This is where our staff who are doing our data analysis, our health education, our health promotion and outreach efforts in the community, a lot of our strategic planning and working with all of our community coalitions and various groups throughout the district, the staff here focus in those areas. We also highlighted the Berry County Baby Cafe, which was an initiative we launched a couple of years ago to try to increase breastfeeding in the community and provide support for moms who need that help with breastfeeding. This is targeted at our WIC moms, but is open to anyone who is currently breastfeeding. And it's in partnership with the library here in Hastings. That's where it's held. Through the Baby Cafe, that it's a weekly service. We've served over 80 moms and babies during that time with breastfeeding support. So it's been a very successful initiative here in Berry County that we've received just very excellent feedback from the moms who really needed this kind of support in the community. Next 2 pages focus on environmental health. Fiscal year 2018, as you all are well aware, really focused on TOAST. The initial half of the fiscal year was focused on the discussion of what to do with the TOAST program, and then the second half was really about the repeal and then the rollback of the program and the closure, along with reduction in staff and then realignment of how we do things and adjustments from there. So that took quite a bit of time of the Environmental Health Division, along with other staff in the agency, focusing on that. So on pages 14 and 15, you have some highlights from the year from some of our other services, and then our program statistics as well for environmental health. The next 2 pages really talks about emergency preparedness and the role that we play as the health department in emergency preparedness as the entity that's responsible for public health in the district. We do a lot of activities. We have a full-time emergency preparedness coordinator who's working with our other emergency responders throughout the district and throughout the region and the state to assure that we're prepared to respond when something happens. Then page 18 highlights My Community Dental Centers. This is a dental clinic that's available for anyone who wants those services, though it's located in Charlotte. We contract with My Community Dental Centers to run the dental clinic on our behalf, and it's provided in a location in Charlotte right next to our health department space over there in the governmental complex. So this highlights some of their program statistics and highlights for the year. And then page 19, the last page, provides information on our financials, our expenditures and revenue for the fiscal year. So a few other things that I wanted to talk about outside of the annual report. First, I wanted to let you all know that in March of this year, we had our state accreditation site visit. State accreditation is something that it's a requirement for local public health departments in Michigan. It happens every 3 years, where the state comes for about a week's time and evaluates many of our programs and services to assure that we're meeting the requirements that they've set forth. And I'm very pleased to report to you that out of a possible 108 indicators that are required, we met all of them. And out of a possible 14 what they call important, or they're not required, but they're important, we also met all of those. And so the health department received essentially a 100% in their state accreditation visit, which I believe is the first time we have done that ever, as far as I'm aware. So that is, a great accomplishment, and really just an acknowledgement of the expertise that our staff bring. I believe some of you saw the accreditation manual when the committee was meeting, and so the level of complexity that exists in that, and it takes a lot of time to work through those processes and procedures, and I'm very proud of our staff for the work that they put into that, and that accomplishment of doing as well as they did. The other issue I wanted to report on that is sort of a highlight of the past year, though again, not necessarily fiscal year 18 for us, was in December of 2019, the health department worked with Spectrum Penic on a Legionella situation with their water. So I haven't had the opportunity to talk to all of you about this, though I'm sure you've seen it in the media. This was a sort of new territory for the health department to go into. Again, it's another example of where all aspects of the health department needed to work together to address the situation. Environmental health, personal health, and our planning and promotion unit all came together to work on this crisis that was going on. Just to summarize what happened, essentially, after 2 potential cases of Legionnaires were diagnosed from former patients of Spectrum Penic, the hospital took the precautions to do some water testing within their facility for the Legionella bacteria, and after doing that, discovered that their bacteria or that their water was infected with the Legionella bacteria pretty widespread through the hospital. And so the results of that testing came back, was it the day after Christmas or the day before Christmas, right around that Christmas holiday, just an ideal time. And so we moved into crisis mode pretty quickly and working very closely with the hospital to figure out what do we need to do at this point in time. And we, immediately put them on water restrictions, and then instituted several precautions at the time to assure that no additional exposure could happen. I really have to acknowledge the work that the hospital did in this area. We were advising them on what to do, but they really chose to do this water testing out of just an abundance of caution. One of the cases ended up not fitting within the definition of a hospital-acquired situation, but they just chose to take these extra steps just to assure that there's no other risks for their patients. And so, and right from the beginning, they have worked very well with us to figure out how do we address this. They were most concerned about making sure that they fix these problems before anything else can happen. And so we've worked very well with them. I'm very thankful for their cooperation. And they have since instituted, pretty much immediately after the test results came back, within, I want to say it was about a week, they implemented a water filtration system hospital-wide that helped treat or I should say water treatment system that treated the water to remove any of the bacteria from it, so that they can just cut the source off right from the beginning. And so that has, with that, there's a learning curve to that, and they have continued needing to do water testing, and we continue to monitor that. So the situation isn't over with yet, because we're still doing work with them to monitor the results, and then they are also doing enhanced surveillance and testing of patients that are coming in. Anyone who's presenting with a pneumonia at the hospital gets some additional screening to rule out Legionnaires. And so we, just as a normal course of protocol, we will monitor that for a period of time to make sure we're really out of the woods with that situation there. And then it's something that the hospital will have to continue to monitor ongoing forward. So it's a pretty common thing. Actually, since we've experienced this in our district, I've heard of other hospitals around the state. Branch Hillsdale St. Joe Health Department just had it with one of their hospitals. Another hospital in Southeast Michigan just went through it. Obviously, hospitals in the Flint area have been dealing with it that all of you have heard about. So it's pretty common that it's happening, and more facilities are running into it, especially if they're an older facility with a large facility with a large water system in there. It very easily happens. As I look forward to the next year, just to talk about things that we expect the health department will be focusing on. Really the thing that is driving us these days are the emerging health issues that are coming about. Things like hepatitis A, vaccine preventable disease outbreaks. You've heard about what's been happening with measles in the state and in the country. And those are things that we're having to prepare of how are we going to respond to that if we have a situation arise in our district. PFAS is another situation that we're closely monitoring. We had, sort of a small situation happen here in town not too long ago. Other communities are dealing with much bigger PFAS situations that's affecting the drinking water. We've been fortunate so far not to come across that here in our district, but it's an area where we're trying to grow our expertise and be prepared so that if something happens, we're in a good position to respond to that crisis. Along with that, we continue to provide our usual array of services. And so I have staff who are needing, to work the immunization clinics, but in between that, they're studying up on the health effects of PFAS or, the latest information, what's happening with the hepatitis A outbreak. Our staff are very cross-trained, and so that's the way we have to get business done, is try to manage multiple things with the individuals that we have. Along that lines, I had recently shared with the Board of Health sort of a wish list of what our staffing needs are looking into the future. As we continue to be so multifaceted, it's really stretching the staff pretty thin. So when we do have a situation that comes up, it's difficult for the staff to manage their everyday work plus the new crisis that came along. So as an example, last week, some of you may have heard about an outbreak we have going on in Eaton County right now that's been pretty large and somewhat complex with a local restaurant in Charlotte. And so that has consumed quite a bit of staff time as we've dealt with phone calls coming in and needing to do the appropriate screening with all these callers so that we can try to pinpoint what really caused this illness. And so, and that's as they're trying to work their usual jobs of WIC and immunizations and STD and communicable disease and all that other stuff. So, so when I was putting together this wish list, I was thinking about all of that and also really thinking about staff retention and recruitment. We know we're facing retirements in the next 3 to 5 years of some of our key staff, and that really sets us behind when we have somebody who's been with us 20 some years. When they leave, it leaves much bigger hole than someone who's only been with us a couple of years, just because our staff have so much historical knowledge. And when you've been with us for multiple years, you learn pretty much everything that's going on, and it's very difficult to replace that. So as I'm looking at that, we're trying to figure out what direction do we need to go with staffing. And so I did present to the board, like I said, sort of a wish list of what our priorities are that include included 4 staff positions. One of them was specific to our Eaton Behavioral Health Program, which to do clinical supervision. Another one was to do supervision within our personal and community health program, which is our largest division in the agency. And then the other two positions were a sanitarian, an additional sanitarian position, and additional community health and promotion specialist position. So those are that's one of the things that we're thinking about, just trying to plan for where our needs are, and if the funding, if there's a funding opportunity where we can tap into that in order to expand these staff positions, that's where we would be putting our attention. Finally, I was sent a list of questions from Commissioner Wing that I received essentially yesterday, as I'd been on vacation for the last week and then dealing with the outbreak. I haven't had, a whole lot of time to look into those. Some of those required a little bit more investigation than what I would be able to do in the time that I had yesterday and over the weekend. So I will continue to work on responding to those and maybe communicate them to you, and you can take the answers, with whatever direction you want from there. But the ones that I could, answer pretty easily, I'll address now. And I don't know who has seen this list of questions, so I'll just summarize what, I know, or the ones that I'm going to address. There was a question about our IT support services and who we contract for information technology. So I'll start with that one. In 2015, the health department began to contract with Eaton County IT department to provide our infrastructure support. Our network infrastructure report is how I would sort of delineate that. And that contract remains in place, and we plan to continue with that. So they are who, when people ask me who's your IT people, that's who I would respond. It's Eaton County. They're the ones who are handling our network operations and are fixing our computer and dealing with that kind of thing. Separate from that, just recently we began a contract with Lehman Wesley and Associates to support some of our other, what I would say, technology needs. And what that really is specific to is our mostly our software support needs. So we have a few software systems that are specific to us as a health department that require some in-house technical support. And or it's not necessarily technical support, it's more in-house, they're like a database administrator type position. They're the ones who are figuring out how to customize the system for our use and get information out of the systems that we have. And so up until just recently, we had a staff position that was doing that work for us. But we've had quite a bit of turnover in that position in the last few years, and we were really struggling to find a qualified individual who could do this work and stay with us. And so that's when we decided, after several failed attempts on that, we decided to go in the direction of contracting with a firm that has more established capacity to do that. And so we started that in April of this year, and so far it's going really well. We've been very pleased with the work that they've done so far, and so I do expect to continue that. They will also consult with us on, sort of our other technology planning needs, sort of beyond what Eaton IT does and that infrastructure support. They're going to help us plan for the future of what we need for technology, and then, sort of be my communication bridge between, the limited knowledge I have of technology and Eaton County's, really intense technology need or language. So I often need somebody to translate. What did you just tell me? I really don't know. So so that's sort of the role that Lehman Wesley is playing. And then there is still a very small contract that we hold with a firm called 99 Techs that they are really what I would call babysitting our old electronic medical record that we no longer use but are required to maintain for the retention time period. So we're not actively using it. We switched to a new one a couple of years ago, but we have to keep the old one functioning for record retention purposes. I believe it's either for a 7 or a 10-year period. And so 99Techs is keeping that system alive for us so that if we have to pull anything off of it, we're able to do that. So that addresses the IT contract question that I was asked. The next one was about HR services, who provides our HR services. So with that, what I would say is, well, very simple answer is People Matters LLC is the company that we have recently contracted with. We started that contract last fall to provide human resources services. Keeping in mind, for those of you who might not realize, as a district health department, we are our own entity, and so we don't utilize either of the county HR services. So we're not a part of Berry County's HR, and we're not a part of Eaton County's HR. So we do have to provide our own human resources and payroll services. And so this was, again, where we used to do that in-house internally with staff, but it was really getting beyond the scope of what we were capable of doing. And as you all know, personnel are your most important investment, most costly investment, and we needed to make sure that that was being managed appropriately. And so last fall, the Board of Health and myself agreed to turn to a human resources consulting company to provide that service for us. And it's been quite a transition to get to where we're at today, but I'm just very pleased with the level of expertise that they have brought forward and really helping us clean up some of what we'd been doing, things that we just, when you don't know, you don't know. So, so they've really brought forward some more consistency in how HR matters are handled, and just a level of expertise that we were missing in the past. So that's who we're working with. And then last, there was a question about our budget process and how input could be provided to that. As a reminder to all of you, the health department is on an October to September fiscal year cycle. So our new fiscal year will start October 1st. We are currently deep into the budgeting process. Right now, the staff are working hard at preparing a draft budget that will be presented to the Board of Health at their July Board of Health meeting. And so where input can be provided to the budget process would be at the July Board of Health meeting or the August Board of Health meeting, and at any time in between by talking to any of the Board of Health members. So the plan at this point is that a draft budget will be presented at the July Board of Health meeting. In the last several years, we have been able to approve the budget at the August Board of Health meeting, and that is my plan for this year as well. However, I'm hesitating a little bit because of what's happening with the state budget and the fact that that has not been finalized yet. And so it is possible that depending upon what sort of direction we get from the state for some of our state funding, that we may ask the board to delay until September when maybe we would have better numbers, but I'm not sure how that's going to play out. So, but the normal calendar that we've been following the last handful of years has been draft in July and looking for approval in August. And so either of those meetings would be a good time to provide input to the Board of Health. They meet the fourth Thursday of the month. Let's see, July's meeting would be in Hastings, and the August meeting would be in Charlotte. The meetings start at 9:30 in the morning. I believe that concludes everything that I had wanted to say. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have for me.
Anybody have questions for Colette? Commissioner Smoker?
On the flooding part, on environmental health,
can the health department do anything to help us along on the train fields and stuff with the DEQ? And I guess anything would be helpful on this flooding.
As I was just mentioning to Rebecca, I have not had a chance to get an update on what's happening with the flooding since I've been back from vacation. So, I don't have the most current information available of what's going on right now. Up until now, we really have not played an active role in it because there really hasn't been an opportunity for us. It has not been within our. There's been other departments that have taken priority, mainly, Drain Commission, DEQ, those sorts of entities. And so we're working with them where they need us to be involved, but we are not a lead agency in this at all. And so where we have a role to play, we're getting involved, but I think the people that really can do something about it are already involved.
On your staffing, Colette, if I remember right, I seen some figures that after TOAST was dissolved, you were at about 51 employees, and then when we done our ad hoc thing, you were at approximately 58, and I know fluctuations and stuff. But with your wish list, that would put you up, am I guessing, around 62?
Yeah, the last numbers I have for staffing was what we gave at the March report, I think was 58 is right. If we actually were to get all 4 staff positions.
It's a wish list.
Sure, yeah, it's a wish list.
Okay.
So, sure, that would put us up to 52, or 62, I'm sorry.
I just wondered if there was anything subtracted when you lost your IT person and contracted and
well,
HR person.
let me think of the timing of that. It might be a little bit different because you're right. I think those numbers that I gave to the committee are was before we made the decision on the IT position.
And HR maybe?
HR would have already been accounted for.
Thank you. That's all I have.
On the staffing that he just mentioned, is there still 16 health officers dedicated to Berry County?
There's only one health officer dedicated to the district. That's me.
Okay.
I'm the only health officer for the district.
How many people are dedicated to, that work in your department, they're dedicated to Berry County? Used to be 16, wasn't it?
Nope. Actually, I think I might have.
I think what Hoot's referring to is you told us at one time there was approximately 16 that was home officed here.
Mm-hmm. So I think you have to answer that question, I need to explain how we operate as a district.
Didn't we have a comprehensive study about this?
So as a district, our staff work for the district. They work Berry County, they work Eaton County, they work district-wide. Of my 58 staff people, almost all of them, I want to say it's like 47, if I remember. If we go with the 58 number, I want to say it's like 47 of them work district-wide. The only ones who do not work district-wide are the staff for Eaton Behavioral Health. So they're the only ones who are based in Charlotte and only work in Eaton County. The rest of the staff all are given a home base. So they are told your home base is Charlotte or your home base is Hastings. That's typically driven by where are they going to spend the most amount of their time and their home location. Where do they live? So we drive it based on what our needs are and then where they live. And so, so I believe at one point in time, 16 sounds about right. There were 16 people who had a home base of Hastings, meaning that in any given week, most of their time was spent in the Hastings office. But while they're in the Hastings office, they're working for Eaton County too. So they're working as a district. And often, for many of those staff, their home base is Hastings, but they might still be spending 2 or 3 days in Charlotte, depending upon what the needs of our services are at that given time. Same is true with anyone who's home-based in Charlotte. I'm sorry, the sun is,
Can move that ahead so that you're out of the sun. It changes on us during the course of our meetings.
the sun will do that now and then. The same is true for the staff that are based in Charlotte. They might have a home base of Charlotte, but on any given day, they could be sitting in the Charlotte office all day long, but doing work on behalf of Berry County. Or they could be over in the Berry County office doing work. It just depends upon what they're assigned to, what project they're working on, and what's happening. So 16 is not a good number to think about how many people work in Berry County. Really, the vast majority of my staff are working for Berry County at any given time.
I had a question about the vaccine for Hep A. So when I think of vaccines, I think of like diphtheria, tetanus, polio, those things that we all got as children, that they still are stressing that you need to bring your babies in and get them vaccinated. But Hep A, is that really a vaccine that prevents Hep A?
Yes.
Is that new?
Newer. I couldn't tell you what year, but I know.
In the last decade.
Longer than that
Longer.
because my oldest is 19 and he got it when he was younger, very little.
That was one of Olivia's first vaccines.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not. I knew someone that had been exposed, but they didn't qualify. The vaccine wouldn't have stopped them from getting.
There's a difference if you've been exposed, then there's a different course of treatment that you can follow. But getting the vaccine will protect you
Okay.
from getting the disease.
Okay. So, but then the treatment, if you're exposed to something different, do
Yes.
you cover that?
We are able to provide it's a different type of, like, I'm not a nurse, so I'm going to stumble these words a little bit, but different type of like serum or whatever that's used and a different terminology for that. But yes, we can do that in the office. We don't do it very often though.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smoker.
Is there any citizens that's required to get that? Like, I guess what I had in mind is first responders, ambulance people. Is there a requirement they get that, or
Some employers will require it.
they can do that then?
So employers can, depending upon what is happening, can make that a requirement. I don't know which ones do or which ones don't.
Okay.
David.
Thanks for coming, Colette. First of all, great job on the annual report, because when someone asked the question, what does our health department do? I think that's a great summary to look through there when you look at personal health and what child services are available, environmental health. It lists off all the inspections and things. That's a pretty broad brush with a lot of things that you're involved in that's in a nice, concise format. So
Thank you.
that's well presented, so I appreciate you summarizing that as quickly with all that detailed information. As far as the state accreditation goes, first of all, congratulations on that. Does the state give us a ranking as far as out of, you know, the 50-some district health departments or health departments in the state? Is that number one? Are we in the tops? Are we in the A class? Where does that put us?
No, I've never seen anything like that. The distinction is that we expect to receive accreditation with commendation, is what they call it, because of those 14 important indicators that I said we did right. You have to have a certain percentage of those to be considered accredited with commendation. So that's sort of your special recognition, or you're just accredited. And so if you didn't get the percentage of the 14 correct, then in the end, everyone has to be accredited. So that's sort of why there isn't this ranking, because in the end, you have to meet all of those 108 requirements. It's just whether you do it on the first time through, or you have to spend a year doing corrective actions with potentially a revisit after that year.
Is this our first time getting accredited the first time through?
I think it is. I am not remembering it. There may have been one other time, but I don't think so. I think this is the first time we've done it 100% through without having to do any corrective plans of action.
Well, it's impressive considering all the things that have been going on this year. I was reflecting back on the Legionella outbreak. Did we have that expertise in-house, or is that something where you actually reach out to state or federal to pull in resources?
Yeah, no, we had to learn all of that. It was a crash course. I mean, certain staff had been exposed to it at conferences and trainings over time, and obviously it's been a growing issue that the state has been pushing information to us, but with everything else that we're all dealing with, it's hard to become an expert in that without the pressure to do so. So really in, those first few days of this happening, everyone was reading up on, refreshing themselves on what they needed to know.
And there were 2 deaths accredited to that Legionella?
One.
1 death, okay. I know there was something in there. And with I don't know if you're at liberty to talk about the food outbreak. Did they determine the cause of?
We have not determined the precise cause, but what we know is that what's assumed to know at this time is that it's not a norovirus. So normally, most of the outbreaks that we've had to deal with at restaurants, it usually ends up being a norovirus type outbreak where it's vomiting and diarrhea. Usually somebody is sick. Usually one of the staff are sick, and they've contaminated certain food items. Or there was a customer who was sick in the restaurant and it wasn't properly cleaned up, and then it spreads from there. This outbreak was a little bit different because pretty quickly after we started getting phone calls of people who were ill during the time frame in question, we were discovering that there was not the volume of vomiting that normally comes with a norovirus outbreak. And so what that led the epidemiologist to believe is that it's actually a food toxin that is caused by improper food handling. And so that's what prompted us to go back out to the restaurant and start doing additional review of what's going on here, what's happening, and discovered some other problems that they were having, which led to the second shutdown. So we're still working with them to figure out, I can't tell you what dish in particular was affected at this point in time. We may be able to as the data continues to be reviewed and assessed later on, but at this point we don't know that.
Hopefully it's not the bean burrito. But well, it's been an interesting year with the Legionella, the outbreaks, the hepatitis, the measles, with all the things going on. So kudos to you and your staff for keeping up this update on it. It's been an interesting year being a little closer involved in it as a health board member and seeing the staff turnover and all the crises that have been coming across your desk and trying to take a vacation to be able to pull some of that off. So we appreciate everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Smelker?
I've had one chance. Go ahead, Dan.
What's Orlando Todd's title?
I don't know his official title, but he, I think it's Director of Local Public Health Services for the state of Michigan. Okay. He's essentially the liaison between the state and local health departments.
Okay. Well, the reason I mention that is I didn't know, but he did hint that the accreditations are very important from the standpoint that there's some grant money that's maybe allotted quicker and more and larger amounts for those that have good accreditations. So I think that could be important to us too. So.
Commissioner Smelker.
On your accreditations, you say they're with you about 3 days to a week, checking up on this stuff. How many staff hours do you think you have working with them? And this happens every 3 years. Any chance you're talking to them and going to every 5 years?
There's many health departments who would like that, but the state sets the rules on that. It is quite a bit of staff time. Accreditation's been around now for about 16 years, and so we've been through it quite a bit, and, staff are pretty seasoned at it, at least most of the staff. Every so often we get a new staff thrown in, and it throws them for a curve, but So the week that they're here, they're pretty much doing 1 to 3 programs a day. And so typically that's 1 or 2 staff person per program tied up for that part of the time, plus my time, plus the director's time, you know, because I have to jump from each one to kind of hear what's going on. And then really the week that they're here, that's the least intensive part of it. It's the build up to it, of getting all the documentation ready. So it is quite a bit of staff time, but it's hard to summarize. It's also work that we need to be doing anyways.
Oh,
So,
okay.
you know, it's
makes me feel a little
refreshing,
better.
it's refreshing our policies and procedures. It's, you know, checking our forms. It's reviewing our processes, sort of doing, it's all about quality improvement. It's all looking at quality improvement to make sure that we're doing the best that we possibly can with the resources that we have.
Thank you.
Anything else for Colette? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Public hearings, we have none. Items for consideration.
Madam Chair, I move for the following items to be considered. Approval of claims in the amount of $132,045.51.
Support.
Been moved by Smelker, supported by Gibson, to approve for the approval of claims in the amount of $132,045.51. Is there discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Geiger,
Yes.
Gibson,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Smelker,
Yes.
Connor. Yes. Wayne.
Yes. The item is approved.
I move for the approval of the Berry County Annual Financial Report, years ended December 31, 2018.
Support.
Moved by Smelker, support by Jackson, for the approval of the Berry County Annual Financial Report, year ended December 31st, 2018. Is there discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Gibson,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Smelker,
Yes.
Connor. Yes. Geiger,
Yes.
Wayne.
Yes, the item is approved.
I move for the adoption of the attached amendment 2019 Berry County Board of Commissioners Rules, Procedures, and Regulations pursuant to the recent amendment to the Open Meetings Act.
Second.
Moved by Smelker, second by Connor, for the adoption of the attached amendment of the 2019 Berry County Board of Commissioners Rules of Procedures and Regulations pursuant to the recent amendment to the Open Meetings Act. Discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Jackson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Smelker,
Yes.
Connor. Yes. Geiger,
Yes.
Gibson,
Yes.
Wayne.
Yes, the item is approved.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 1911, resolution to honor Suzanne Rose, Administrative Assistant at Central Dispatch.
Support.
Moved by Smelker, support by Jackson, for the adoption of Resolution 1911, resolution to honor Suzanne Rose, Administrative Assistant at Central Dispatch. Is there discussion? So I just want to point out that the resolution number is 1911. She was the very first employee at 911 when she was hired.
Oh, yeah.
And so that is a very symbolic number, and it is my greatest honor to give her that resolution number in support of her service to Berry County. So, is there further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Parker,
Yes.
Smelker,
Yes.
Connor. Yes. Geiger,
Yes.
Gibson,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Wayne.
Yes, the item is approved.
I move for the adoption of Resolution 1912 to reform the citizens' appointment process.
Support.
Moved by Smelker, support by Jackson, for the adoption of Resolution 1912 to reform the citizen appointment process. Discussion.
I did read the resolution. I did see that there was a change to the third, be it further resolved. But I'm still voting no because it still sounds to me like if they interview 5 people, because they will be interviewing them, if they interview 5 people, they could only recommend forward 2 to this board. I don't,
Any other discussion? I think I have concerns with the way that the resolution is written, that it appears that it may be in conflict with the Open Meetings Act.
yes.
There is a provision in the Open Meetings Act that expressly prohibits a committee from making decisions that the board should be making. And so if through the interview process, the way it's worded, that the candidates will have an opportunity to come up and talk to the board, but it makes it sound like that decision's already made by that subcommittee. And that's where the problem is, because this is a public decision that needs to be made. We would still have to approve their work, but it takes the work out of what we do. And I think that it's a slippery slope, and we maybe need to revisit the wording. Or I know that the thought behind the process is genuine in trying to help us do our work, but I think the wording is maybe not precise enough to avoid problems with the Open Meeting Act. I love the idea, if we had 75 applicants for one position, that we would need to have a subcommittee to go through those applicants, because there is no way we could do interviews for that many people in this setting. We can't even fit all them people in this room. So I hesitate to support this today because of the way it's written, and we just maybe need to clarify it just a little bit more.
The only way that I think, I talked to Michael about this, is to have that would be a posted public meeting that this committee would have to go through, and I don't think we want that. I would rather have a situation where if the people wanted to be interviewed by the full board, that they'd have that opportunity. If there's could be some wording in that, I would also think that they can make that, maybe make a recommendation, but that not eliminate the possibility of the other people wanting to come before the board to be interviewed. If there could be some wording that way, I think it's a good idea.
So your concern is the wording that all applicants forwarded by the interview teams?
No, I think my issue is the interview part. And I think that's where we give this committee the authority to act, where the committee does the interview and then tells us to appoint them. I think that's the catch. I think they need to be, I think we could have the committee do interviews or do an education piece to help identify the right board that people would want to be on. But it's where they're invited to speak at the committee of the whole or commissioner meeting where their appointment is scheduled to be approved. That makes it sound like that committee is doing the appointment rather than the Board of Commissioners, and that's the violation of the Open Meetings Act.
It's almost a application, education
I think that's,
forum.
I think that would be a better wordage or a better use of that time. I think when we allow that subcommittee to make the appointment and then us to approve it is where we get in trouble with open meetings.
So even, well, basically that, yes, I appreciate that you said that, you worded that very nicely. But if they were to eliminate any candidate from coming up here, that's what changes our decision, because we don't get to see everyone that applied. We don't get to interview everyone.
I still think it'd be hard to do 75 applicants if we
absolutely.
ever get there.
Yeah.
We would get there
Absolutely.
in, you know,
But
get
I-
a county that wants to be involved.
I am for the education piece about, so you want to serve on a board and an application, go over an application, go over, what does the person on a board do in conjunction with the other training that Ben had brought up and that we are now doing for our board members. And it would just be a continuation of that education.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
can I address Ben? You think you could come up with something that would kind of give that, because I like the idea of that interview process ahead of time.
Yeah, I think really you don't need to change much in this, by just eliminating that one paragraph and just having that the resolution go in effect in like another month or something, and give us, or give me some time to come up with some solutions.
I would make a motion to that effect, if that,
Of what effect?
We're gonna table it
That's
We're
what
not
I'm
gonna
thinking.
table it.
That's BOC.
We can,
Just
we can
strike-
delay it till
No, just
we can
strike
refer it
the-
back to committee.
The third to the last paragraph,
Just vote this down, come up with something else.
whatever.
where do I have this thing?
What was your motion, Dan?
Well, to rewrite that part of it, or well, to eliminate it, but still do the interview thing, so, I don't know. I want, Ben put a lot of work in this. I don't want it to be thrown away. I just kinda wanna have it so that we're gonna be worried about Open Meetings Act coming back and biting us. And that's basically what I'm trying to do, so. If Ben wants to come up with something now, or if he wants to come up with something later, but I would defer to you as far as what your choice would be. You said you don't want to table it, so.
Well, table is the wrong destination for this. If you table this, you have to bring it up in the same meeting. You table it to a certain point in the meeting.
Okay.
If
All right, yeah,
you
you're
postpone
right.
it for until another meeting, it should be the very next meeting that you meet. So, I guess, what is the board's pleasure?
Just take a 10-minute break, see if we come up with something. I'll work with Michael.
Can we take a break with a motion on the floor?
We can.
Discussion?
We can do whatever you want to do. So,
Move to go
Don't
to
think we
immediate
can.
recess.
is there a second to that?
Second.
All right, the committee will stand in recess.